Welcome back to Editors Roundtable. What an interesting week this was. One in which we hit that milestone of 25,000, but one in which we also saw large amount of selling pressure. Ashwini Agarwal of Demeter Advisors has been sitting with us. Ashwini, one of the big talking points this week was the auto sector. We got earnings from Tata Motors where the management is quite cautious about the way going forward. The auto sales for the month of July were not that great. And then we had the Ola IPO that opened up as well. Your thoughts on the sector overall?
Sonia, the demand situation is quite concerning, and it's not just automobiles, it's across the board. If you listen to the commentary from a lot of companies, whether it's jewelry companies, whether it's various luxury products, not just in India, but around the world, and you look at the car sales numbers, I think there's a massive slowdown that's happening. The reasons are not very clear. Some people believe that basically post-COVID, there was a lot of pent-up demand, which is now spent force, and we are more in a consolidation phase in terms of growth. Some believe that money has just got invested in markets and people don't want to spend money on consumption. It sounds bizarre, but could be possibly true. So the reasons are not very clear, but there is a slowdown. And after 2 years of very strong sales growth, especially in cars, who knows, this might continue for a little bit. Two-wheelers, on the other hand, are looking a little more constructive, where hopefully if the monsoon continues to stay on track and with higher MSP for various crops, you could see a little more lift to two-wheeler sales. So car companies are looking to be, facing a little bit of a headwind at this point.
Okay, car companies are facing a bit of a headwind. Ashwini, thanks a lot for joining us and speaking to CNBC TV 18. Well, moving on, the US presidential race is well underway as the Republican candidate Donald Trump and the latest entrant, Democrat candidate Kamala Harris, battle it out for the top job. Prashant has moved to the wall. Prashant, what are the latest polls saying? And more important, where does Kamala Harris stand when it comes to various political issues?
Well, thank you for that. The premise of sort of putting this piece together is basically very simple. The election in the US in November is going to be between Trump and Kamala Harris. Now, Trump, we all know what he stands for. We know his views on taxation, oil, where he wants the dollar to be, what he wants to do with regards to China, Europe. We know the whole thing, right? Because he's been president before. And of course, it's been so well covered. We also kind of knew where Biden stood. Now, the assumption which many are making is that because Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris has stepped in as a presidential candidate, she will mostly follow in Biden's policy playbook. And that maybe is correct as well. But, what are her own views? What are her own preferences? Because this is now a close race. A month ago, markets were kind of very comfortable in the assumption that Donald Trump is going to sweep the polls because he was fighting Joe Biden, which isn't the case anymore. You have one of the largest betting websites in the U.S. predicted now saying that Democrats will win the election. The actual elections are still, 80, 90 days away, and a lot could happen in that time period. But the point is, it's a real fight in that sense. So that's the premise of this particular piece. What are Harris's own views on just 4 or 5 important policy matters? So on taxation, this is what she believes. She's expected to keep Biden's tax plan intact at a broad level. The key difference is that she supported raising corporate taxes in the U.S. to 35%. And that is the reason why the general sort of undertone with many, especially in financial markets, is that, you're going to take a slightly more leftish kind of lean as far as policy matters are concerned. She also suggested taxing stocks, bonds, and derivative trading to fund social programs. So that's the other kind of thing that I picked up in terms of what her own preferences are. On tariffs, where does she stand? She's been a known critic of Trump tariffs. Trump, of course, his most preferred tool of negotiation is tariffs, right? She's against it, and she stated, and I quote, "I'm not a protectionist Democrat." One of the big things which is expected to change in the first 100 days after the U.S. elections, if Republicans take control, is the use of tariffs in terms of other countries. On foreign policy, it's interesting. Most likely continued policy in terms of the conflict in Ukraine and Israel and their support to both countries. But Harris has been more vocal in reprimanding Israel for some of its actions during the conflict in Gaza. Interestingly, she skipped Netanyahu's address to the Congress when he was visiting the US recently. So that is something at the margin which is perhaps slightly different. On energy policy, oil prices, she'll likely expand investments in clean energy. Her suggested climate plan was worth $10 trillion against Biden, who suggested spending $1.6 trillion. And of course, she is in favor of complete ban on fracking. Fracking is a measure for oil production. On technology, she's historically pushed for more tech regulation. She's, by the way, the lead on AI regulation in the current administration. Whereas Biden wanted to bust up and break up large technology giants, her kind of policy preference seems to be steps to ensure more customer privacy. On immigration, I mean, I think there is not very much difference. On healthcare, she supported expansion of Medicare to all Americans, and she's likely to maintain the push to lower drug prices in the US. So just, I mean, some differences. Largely, I mean, I think it would be right to assume that she would continue what Biden's policy book is. But I think also important to remember, if she is, come November, elected president, what she really stands for and what her own views are. Back to you.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Well, lots of action there on the political setup in the United States. But with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Editor's Roundtable. More news and updates coming up on the other side.